Welcome to Stoughton Media Access Cable's Community Forum Show. My name is Steve Kelley. I'll be the host today, and I'm delighted to bring you Harris Yoffa, all the way from Israel, where he moved several years ago and resides. And he's going to, shall I say, school us on how different it is to live in a country that is sort of under siege. It's a very interesting place to be in the world. The Gaza Strip is nearby, and there's a lot of conflict in the area. But before we go on, I'm just going to pull my Roy. I'm going to bring Roy in, and he's going to give a proper introduction to Harris Yoffa. So our executive producer, Roy Cohen, go ahead.
Okay, Steve, thank you very much. Harris, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you as part of the Community Forum show. And I just have a little opening comments that I prepared that pretty much go like this. These days, no matter which side of the news cycle you get your information from, it's difficult to understand what's really happening in Israel. I mean, who do you believe? Whether you follow the world events on CNN or Fox or wherever, you get different sides of the happenings. Our guest, Harris Yoffa, will give us his objective view on the conflict since he's right in the middle of it. Harris, welcome. It's an honor and nice to see you again because it's been several years since we've gone our separate ways there, but welcome to the show. Okay, can you hear us, Harris?
I can hear you, but you can't hear me. Oh, naturally.
No, I think we got you now, Harris. So to the audience, we have there'll be a chance of a few technical difficulties. Harris is speaking to us from Israel, southern Israel, about 5 miles from the Gaza Strip, right in the sort of the hot center. And in fact, I think he's considered to be in a 30-second zone, which means that if there are any kind of alerts, he may have to leave us quickly because he's got 30 seconds to take care of himself. So Harris, it is really strange from this side of the ocean, if you would, to have to be on alert and very, very focused on your personal safety. Tell us a little bit about what it's like to live in the community you live in. I think it's called Ashkelon. So Ashkelon is a small city in Israel. Tell us a little bit about the city and about the cautions and the tension of living in Ashkelon, 5 miles from the Gaza Strip.
Sure. Number one, Ashkelon is no longer so small. It's actually a growing city. A lot of building going on now, as there's a lot of growth in Israel in general. Being so close to the Gaza Strip, where over the last easily 10 to 15 years, there's been a lot of tension and at different times a lot of dangerous activity. So it's got its challenges. You mentioned the 30-second rule, and again, what that means is in the event that rockets are detected on their way from Gaza, the sirens go off, the air raid sirens go off in the background, and here in Ashkelon, we are listed as having 30 seconds to get to a protected area, and depending where you live, a protected area could be a reinforced protected room within your apartment. It could be a bomb shelter in the basement of the building, or as it is in my building where I'm on the 6th floor, so the bomb shelter in the basement is not really an option, but the stairwell is. And in most of the apartment buildings, the stairwells, just due to the way the apartment buildings were designed, I don't think it was for this purpose, but they happen to be in the center of the building. So when it's in the center of the building and you have apartments on 4 sides, you've got a certain amount of protection by default. And I don't know if it's a matter of me just being too complacent or too stubborn uh, to be really scared or shuddered from the sirens that go off and go running away to live somewhere else. I came here to Ashkelon because it's a beautiful place to live. It's it's part of historical Israel with a lot of for those who are archaeologically inclined, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of history, and it's just a really great place to live. So that's. I mean, you deal with it. The dealing with the alerts these last couple of weeks, the last 10 days, we're in day number 10 of the official operations. Just as it happened 7 years before, you may remember a term called protective edge, and a couple of years before that, there was another one where Hamas, which is an organization identified by the United Nations and all other many nations in the world as officially as a terrorist organization, sworn to the destruction of the state of Israel, are getting arms, largely funded by traceably Iran and Qatar, and because they're not an official army and they're not an official government, and in their quest to rid the world of Israel, they claim it's Israel, but it's all Jews. They fire off rockets, and these are not the highest tech of rockets. They don't have guidance systems, so they just sort of aim and fire them off. And to give an idea of the amount of rockets fired off, in the last 10 days, there have been over 4,000 rockets fired from Gaza into Israel, many of them hitting in Ashkelon and the area along the east side of the Gaza Strip, but going as far north as approximately 50 miles north of here up to Tel Aviv and just past there. All with it and covering in its path. It's not like they only go to Tel Aviv. The rockets are dropping all over the place there. And because they're not guided, they are not aimed at any particular target, let alone military target. And the other interesting thing, sadly, but it feeds the narrative they're promoting, of the 4,000 rockets, there are estimates that approximately 25% of them actually don't even make it out of Gaza and end up landing and destroying the homes of Arabs in Gaza. And they blame this on Israel. So it's a very complicated situation. To give an idea of the kind of disruption to life, just over the past 48 hours, I'll tell you this, yesterday, Tuesday the 18th, overnight it was sort of quiet. After about midnight, I was able to go to sleep. Of course, when you're going to be running laps from, in my case, from the apartment to the stairwell, you sleep fully clothed. No one needs to see that. And had a little bit of quiet on Tuesday, but starting in the afternoon, and this was largely because Israel had opened up the crossing between Israel to Gaza to allow humanitarian aid in, fuel and food supplies, because people need that stuff. But and I'll just rattle off the time checks because I wrote it down every time. 2:30 p.m., 2:45 p.m., 3:26 p.m., 4:36 p.m., 5:38 p.m., 9:02 p.m., 10:32 p.m., 11:44 p.m. And in between, I'm trying to, at some point I was at work. I work from home. So I was at my desk going back and forth. Other times you try to do the regular things you do when you're home, and of course later on go to sleep. And if I can be so, I'll be delicate about it, but there are certain things that most people think of as usual and customary in their lives that you think twice about going to certain places in the house, because you might not be able to move if you hear the siren. Once again, it was quiet overnight last night until about 1:30 this afternoon, and we have 1:20 this afternoon, 2:58 p.m. we got a double. What that means is you go to the protected area and you wait for the sirens to stop, and you wait a little bit longer for anything else to land, and then you go back, and before we could leave the stairwell, there was yet another volley. And then again, 4:48 p.m. tonight, 5:15 p.m., and 8:04 tonight. And there are booms going on in the background. I'm not sure what that is. We'll find out shortly. So this is a disruption to life. It just is what it is.
Let me jump in here, and so I think it's really a stretch for any one person to have like a complete understanding, but it's a very complex issue. And there is on both sides this questionable thought that there is no right and wrong. There is what is. You just survive. But what would you think someone who's firing those rockets is thinking in terms of like what their action is designed to do? Is it to be disruptive? Is it to kill people? What do you think is going on?
The objective, as there's no speculation needed. The objective, as stated for the record by Hamas, is the destruction of the state of Israel by whatever means. That's pure and simple. So that's the motivation. And of course, at the same time, very often there's a question, well, if we know what is causing it, how do we stop it? And in this particular case, there are some other things that have been identified as the causes of what's going on right now, and they're really tangential, and we might get into them in a little bit. But how does it stop is very simple, and I'll pull a quote from a previous prime minister, may she rest, Golda Meir, who said, and other prime ministers have mentioned also, if the Israelis stop responding, that's one thing, and if they stop responding, it's another. If the Arabs stop sending rockets, there'll be peace. If Israel stops responding, there'll be no more Israel. And Golda Meir, she should rest, said, it'll stop when they start to love their children more than they hate ours. And it's poetic in its own way, but it's also very poignant. But you always have to have a reason. And there were 3 events that happened this year that, by virtue of the way the calendar works, happened to come together to form a combination that doesn't normally happen. And those 3 things are the Muslim month of Ramadan, which is a month of introspection, much like the Jewish period of introspection before the Jewish high holidays. The month of Ramadan is a similar month, but it's a month of daytime fasting and introspection. And at the end, it has become in vogue in the last few years, for whatever reason, kill the Jews is how you celebrate the end of Ramadan. So that's number 1. Number 2, it happened that the day that recognizes the reunification of Jerusalem back in 1967 as a result of the Six-Day War, and Israel took back the old city of Jerusalem. It's called Jerusalem Day, and that happened at the same time. And then on top of that, there's a completely unrelated, not even political, a purely civil thing going on where there's some property in an area of East Jerusalem which prior to 1948 had been owned by Jewish families, and after 1948 until 67, because Jews had been expelled, there were Arabs living in those properties, and after 67 the courts ruled, well, they could stay, but they have to pay rent. They haven't paid rent for 40 years. There's an eviction notice issued, and there's another reason that the as you mentioned about the press and selective reporting, and the reports are the Jews are throwing the Arabs out of Jerusalem, which is a gross exaggeration. So those are the things that started it this time. We don't know what's going to end it. There have been, in the last 24 hours, in addition to and on the tails of U.S. President Biden stating for the record, the United States certainly supports Israel's right to, self-determination and preservation and to defend itself. And earlier today, discussions between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu went in the direction of urging on the part of the United States for Israel to back off. Not a lot of no discussion in those discussions of what's going to be demanded of Hamas, and Prime Minister Netanyahu mentioning that he understands and would love to make it as sooner than later, but Israel is going to have to do what Israel has to do in order to defend her citizens. At the same time, apparently there's been some activity in the United States Congress where certain members have decided to call for the United States to stop supplying any kind of military arms to Israel because of what Israel is doing to the Palestinians. So there are a lot of things coming in, a lot of things that are not totally inaccurate by any means, just being spun in a way that has absolutely no application.
So are you common in your peers that you get your news from, maybe I would say, is it Israeli public television? Where are you getting the information, and you present it as fact? And I think that we all tend to look at the news that we're receiving and say, this is all there is to the news. And so I'm not doubting you on that. I'm curious, where do you get it? And do other people agree that we accept it wholesale? And I'll make that nuance by telling you that here, back in the States, there's a real crux, a real problem with news now, because it's more biased opinion than news, depending on which party you have an interest in and things like that. So, maybe give us a comparison, and where do you get your news, and how comfortable are you and your peers getting it that way?
Just as you mentioned in the United States, because we do get some American television over here, the different cable services have different of the networks, but there certainly are, the news organizations certainly have turned into more commentary channels than news channels. I agree with you there completely. And how you have two different sources citing the same facts, but the spin, as the vernacular goes, is what happens. I watch news services from the U.S. and England and France that are in English language. I also watch the Israeli one of the Israeli news channels that's from the television channels, as well as some of the other the military sources that also have channels on the social media. And I try to also measure what I hear and take with a little bit of grains of apprehension, depending on what I know or suspect the perspective to be of the newscasters or the commentators. And I will be back in just a few minutes.
Oh boy. imagine living like that, Steve.
So perhaps, Roy, you could, can you mute that so that we could?
No, I'm going to leave it in. I want people to hear what's going on over there.
Okay, all right. So we're gonna stick with the program. Obviously, there's been a missile attack in the area where Harris is. And so he's gone to take cover, and then he expects to come back relatively short period of time. I assume that means if he's lucky enough to not be in a specific area of one of the missile drops. So
Right.
it's certainly, there was, and the audience should know, we didn't plan this in any way to coincide with a known threat.
No, that's life over there.
Yeah, that's what life is there. And I don't think we can fathom it as American citizens. We do have our problems here in America, obviously, but this seems to take us to an entirely different level. Just kind of witnessing just normal life at, let's say, 10 p.m. And then apparently rockets have been sent to do harm, at least, and there's some idea that there are no specific targets. At least that's what Harris would have us think about.
He's
So
back.
I think Harris is back. So Harris, welcome back.
I don't know how well you were able to hear the sound.
Well, we heard it.
Last part of there, and that is that the aiming is like with a compass, northwest, south, at the angle. And depending on which missile you use, some missiles are rated as having a further range than a shorter range, and so that's the only control they really have over the rockets. They're not going to take a long-range rocket and try to fire it at the town of Sderot, which is less than a mile from the Gaza border. They're in the 15-second range. They literally have, like, you better be in your booth. One of the and that's an excellent example to mention is that in the town of Sderot, very creative means being done, because how do you move around outdoors if you've always got to be near a bomb shelter? And what they do is, I'm sure you've taken, you know people who've been taking a local bus, and there's a little bus stop, and there's a little, little shade shelter. Well, in Sderot, the bus shelters are 2-foot thick concrete, and you go in and you can go inside. So you can run to a bus stop, because that's about as far as you're going to get in 15 seconds. So that's a consideration. But that being said, so now you know what it's like when I got to get up, got to go, and you come back, and I don't know if you heard booms or not, but I'm sure you heard the sirens. So that's and what happens is, in the different social media groups, a service that's not as popular in the States but very popular here is something called WhatsApp. I'm sure people have heard of it. Lots of groups that for all the communities that and they are very supportive of each other, let each other know what's going on where, and so you know what's dropping where, and that's pretty much where that's at. So
So if I could be candid with you, it seems to me that there has to be an incredible magnetic pull to stay there. Because for myself, I would say, well, gee, maybe I just shouldn't be here. It's like if you're in an ocean barrier zone, where the ocean storms come and hit, and you'd say eventually, geez, maybe we shouldn't be here. So how do you fight that impulse to not want to leave?
I'll give some perspective, because again, when you're in the United States and Israel is over there, okay, one would think that, Tel Aviv is 50 miles away. Normally they're going to be, quote unquote, pretty safe. And except for this past week and a half, They have been. The majority of the rockets going on all the time, and you don't hear about that in the United States, are in the Gaza Strip and the area around the Gaza Strip, stretching out about 3 miles. So the question becomes, why? First of all, why don't you move somewhere safer within Israel? And some people might even go so far as to say, why are you in Israel? And so those are two very different questions. The answer to the first one is, when you consider that even Jerusalem, which is around 70 kilometers from here, 50 to 60 miles from here, and I used to live there. I lived in Jerusalem for 11 years. And even there, they have sirens every so often. Absolutely almost not as much at all compared to here. But it can happen there also. And there's other things going on in Jerusalem, violence from Arabs against Jews in Jerusalem that you hear a lot about. So why do I stay there if it's so dangerous? Because for me, and I will be very careful to own this statement, because it's the decision to move to Israel is one that, first of all, when a Jewish person decides to relocate their life to Israel, it's called making aliyah, which means to go up. Much like anyone who's a student of Bible knows that Jerusalem is up in the mountains. So that's why they call it going up. And for me, the decision, because I'm such a supporter of the State of Israel personally, the whole idea of the State of Israel, and a subject for another time, but traceably, my family does trace back to Israel. Long story, but the short version is, dig far enough back through maybe 18th and 19th century family members in Eastern Europe, but before that, tracing back to, in my case, the town of Hebron in the south in the Judean hills. So there's a sense of Israel really is a Jewish homeland. And so from that perspective, that's one of the reasons why I came to Israel, was because for me, just as Rabbi Hausman has said, some Jews and Israel we need all of these. We need the Jewish people who send their money to Israel. They write a check and that's their thing. Or the people who visit and leave their money in it. They bring their money to Israel as tourists. That's also very important. And then there's the lunatics like myself who want to become part of the circus. And at times it does feel like a circus. Israel is an amazing, amazing place, a land of contradictions, and I'm not even talking the religious part, because people of all faiths come to Israel and realize that when they go to the various places that relate to their particular observance, that it's a very special place. But culturally, there's the running joke for me is, Israel, where they trample you getting onto the bus, because they don't know, but they don't do lines to get on a bus. Israel, where they trample you getting on the bus and then make sure you get a seat. There's a lot of social interaction that is very, very friendly. It is in many ways one giant family, and I'm trying not to super romanticize it, but it is it can be that way. So the draw for the Jewish person to come to Israel, of course, the religious person is going to be drawn to come to Israel because just the logistics of a religious observance life is easier here in Israel, just mechanically. It's like because you don't have to worry about work schedules and everything else, because the country's on a Jewish calendar. That means that the regular work week is Sunday through Thursday, so you don't have to worry about getting done work on Friday in time for the Sabbath if you're a Sabbath observant person, and those related things. But for the not so observant person, there's still a sense of Jewishness. In fact, the secular Israeli is very often more Jewish, not necessarily dogmatic observant, but the cultural part of being Jewish than a lot of the medium observance and secular Americans. It's quite a different flavor. It's a major intangible, so that's why I'm stumbling around trying to discuss it.
Well, you've done a very good job so far. I think that it is hard to fathom um, how people can live that way and just resign themselves to fate in a way that we don't have to do so regularly here. And maybe getting in a car
Well,
is
let me
fate, but you know,
engage in a little bit of dark, very, very dark humor, because living in the Boston area, um, when I mentioned to people that I was going to Israel, and I'm going to say something that's, well, one of the things I like about Israel is we're not as politically correct as in the United States. I don't have to watch what I say as much because people understand what I'm trying to get to without the super insults. But let's just say back in 2007, and someone says to me, "You're going to Israel, but is it safe?" And my usual line at that time was, "Well, we all can't live in Mattapan Square." Now, to the local Bostonian, that has a certain ring to it that may or may not really be true, but the connotation is there. And to people who live in other parts of the country, I'll use a similar part of town to where they live and say, well, because there are times when in Jerusalem, maybe not this week, but for most of the time, I could walk home the 3.5 miles from downtown to where I lived in the southern part of the southern suburb in Jerusalem, and I had no problem to walk home down the street. Did not feel in danger in any shape, form whatsoever. Imagine a state or a community, because you can't have this in the United States anymore. But I was going to go to my cousins who lived an hour and a half bus ride away, and so I'm taking the bus from my apartment to get to the main bus terminal downtown. And as I'm getting on the bus comes to a stop, and a mother puts two little kids on the bus, maybe 7 and 10 years old, and says to the bus driver, "Let them off at," and told him where, and that was the end of that, and off we went. Or you have, young children running around in the streets and going places on their own without the need for parental escort. Israel is starting to catch up to the United States with child not so safety, but right now, children still run around on their own outside. Still, children still could walk to school uphill 6 miles each way, not in the snow because you only have that in Jerusalem. But you could, but you can have that. You have kids going to the mall on their own. So the little things about living in a country that we have all the basic necessities of life. As a matter of humor, people mention one of the jokes that I try to say to people who come from not Boston. I won't say what state where all the Jews live, but I will mention it's a large Jewish population area in the Northeast, and they come to Israel, and you hear, "Why can't I get?" And they will name a product that is specific to the United States, and they'll say, "Why can't I get X in Israel?" And I have to say, "Well, Dorothy, you're not in Kansas anymore, because you're in Israel."
yeah.
But there is a chain of grocery stores that actually carries a lot of Costco stuff. So there are some things, so there are some things that are cool, but you can get pretty much anything in Israel that you might get in the States. Prices are admittedly going to be a lot higher for certain things because obviously there's transportation, and we have a 17% value added tax on everything.
Wow.
I understand that gas prices are going up in the States. What's the price of gas right now in Stoughton?
Uh,
Round
I think Roy
numbers.
might be able to chime in. I'm thinking 289. What are you thinking, Roy?
Yeah, so that's roughly what it is.
Boo hoo, boo hoo, boo hoo, $7.05.
Oh,
Woo.
So
oh,
yeah. So now, but on the other hand, I found it interesting. I mean, since we're chit chat, the ups and the downs of living in Israel. Um, Cell phone plans, because everyone has a cell phone these days. And when I've had the occasion to visit in the States, I have to get a SIM card for my phone to use while I'm in the States. And you have to buy a minimum prepay 1 month plan. And it's like, talk, text, and maybe 3 gig of data. And it's like, $35, $40. And my cell phone plan here in Israel right now, I have unlimited talk, unlimited text, and 200 gig of data, and I pay $34.50 a month. But that's shekels, so you have to divide by the conversion rate, and it comes out to around $12 a month. So some things are cheaper. Okay, food price is about the same, but because salaries are in general a lot lower, it's almost 1.5 to twice the cost, even though the price is the same. So things balance out. Some things are more expensive. Local produce, of course, is very, very affordable and very, very high quality. Imported things like beef, on the other hand, are very, very expensive. But in general, it sounds weird. Over the past almost 14 years, I've actually lived quite comfortably by comparison to how I was in the States, on a lot less money for about the same quality of life, if not more. I have to say that because you asked me about why do you live in Israel. Well, when I was in the States and what I left behind, Roy, I love you and the whole synagogue, but I left behind a house, a car, a job, a wonderful synagogue. I mean, I had the toys. I was living. It was nice. I come to Israel, and for the first 8 years, it took me 8 years before I was able to get a car. So I was a renter. I didn't have a car. Wasn't working a whole heck of a lot, and when I was, it wasn't for a whole lot of money. And yet, in Israel, I have a life, and I'm playing with words that way on purpose. Everybody finds the place that is right for them. For some people, it's a different part of the United States. I know some people that Arizona is where they need to be because of the weather and just whatever it is environmentally there, people-wise. For a lot of people that come to Israel and they want to know why, and this happened in 2006 when the Ahavat Torah congregation trip happened with Rabbi Hausman. I had been a few times, and people said, but what is so special about Israel? And I tell them that while you're in Israel, and it's different for everyone, you will experience a moment, and this is whether you're Jewish or Christian, or whatever religion, if any. But while you're in Israel, you are sure to experience a moment that can best be described as yes. Now that yes will be different for everybody. And I asked someone when we got back from Israel, I asked someone who had been on the trip, and because they had said, Harris, why are you so gaga about Israel?
yeah.
And I said, now do you understand why I'm so gaga about Israel? Oh yeah, I got it. No problem, I got it. And then I asked the second question, can you describe it? No. It's an intangible, and for everyone it's something different.
So what about
Just like health,
healthcare?
or
healthcare costs.
Oh, don't get me started. I'll tell you. Let me tell you about the evils of socialized medicine. Okay. Um, we're all here old enough to remember good old Harvard Community Health Plan.
Yeah, I don't know
Roy,
if we want to mention one, maybe there's a number of them.
they were one of the premier HMOs. Okay. And I mentioned HMO, a health maintenance organization, because they maintain their own. They are for profit. They maintain their own health centers, and they absolutely prioritize care based on perceived need. Like if you work for, if you call it Harvard Community Health and said, I got a hangnail, they'll say, make an appointment for next week. If you call Harvard Community Healthcare and say, I just cut my finger off, they say, come on in. And you'd pay them a certain amount. Their slogan was in sickness or in health. That's why they call themselves health maintenance. They want to keep you healthy. And you'd pay them, and of course it was more affordable, and those were the days just after there was only Blue Cross Blue Shield catastrophic care. Everyone paid their own doctors for regular visits. That was the usual and customary. So HMO was a new thing. Now you've got the hybrid of a PPO, a preferred provider, where the doctors are members of hospitals and there's a lot more care available. A big concern in the United States is that if you change jobs, healthcare doesn't go with you because of the way everything is structured, whether it be one state to another or one company to another. I worked for a company in the States, and I changed companies. It was a moving company in Sudbury, and then I went to work for a banking organization in Quincy, had the exact same healthcare plan, had to re-register for it, and everything changed. Here in Israel, we have 4 main healthcare companies. They are all HMO in structure. They are for profit. However, the premium gets paid to them by the state. And out of your work, out of your salary every month, comes a amount that you pay to the National Insurance Institute, and it's on a percentage. So it's a true sliding scale. The people who make less pay less. The people who make more pay more. And when you change jobs, since it's not connected to your work, your health insurance never changes. Everybody has health insurance here in Israel. If you're not working, there is an arrangement that can be made for a fixed fee. I think it runs around $50 a month if I do the conversion equivalence. So everybody has health insurance here in Israel. I know I'm the picture of health, like never been better, but I'm on a few medications. Why would an Israeli have high blood pressure? I don't know, but among other things. And I have 4 different medications, and it costs me about the equivalent of $100 for a 3-month supply. The rest of it is subsidized. There's no copay for a doctor's office visit. So for regular ongoing care, Israel's pretty darn good. When you get into specialized care and elective stuff, there could be delays. There could be need to go off plan and out of pocket. And there are people who do, in fact, fly abroad, including or especially to the United States for healthcare for certain situations. I'm sure that if I had a serious cancer issue, that I'd probably find myself at Dana-Farber on Brookline Ave. But I don't, thank God. And I'm here. If I have an issue with healthcare, as ongoing things, I go online. I make an appointment. I go see the doctor. If I need a referral, he does a referral. It's all covered internal paperwork, and I'm pretty happy with it. By comparison in cost, it's a lot lower. So healthcare expense is lower. Then again, salaries are a third to a half.
Let me jump in and redirect you to, what about Social Security? Some sort of a retirement, government-sponsored retirement.
This one is hysterical. Because as I mentioned, of the 14 years come July, it'll be 14 years. And of those 14 years, I've worked a total on and off of around 7 or 8 years. And of course, part of your your salary deductions are the equivalent for Israel of the FICO in the United States. And when I got to the age, I know I don't look it. I know I 21, 22, yeah, 3 times over. And when I got to the age, first of all, I got a letter from the National Insurance Institute. You're going to be turning retirement age on a certain date. Please fill out this form. And if you do it by a certain date, we'll take the picture from your driver's license and put it on your senior citizens card that's issued by the government. So no need to join AARP. In addition to that, I automatically convert from paying, even though I'm working, I've converted from paying into the system to, okay, fill out the 12-page form. Guys, kids in Temple, stay in Hebrew school. Fill out the 12-page form and submit it. And I actually am getting a retirement benefit, even though I've only, and it's not a lot, but in proportion to how much time I've put in and how much I've worked, it's sort of proportionate to those giant sums that Social Security sends out to people every month. And I'll tell you this: my Social Security retirement benefit check from the U.S. It goes a lot further here, and B, because I'm registered as not living in the United States, my Social Security retirement benefits are not subject to federal income tax, even though in the United States I believe it is. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. I don't know.
I believe it.
So yeah. And that there are a lot of programs for senior citizens. Automatically, when I turned 65, actually, without me having to do a darn thing, I went to go charge up my transit card for getting on the bus, and automatically it said, "Oh, you qualify for this rate to load your card with because you're now a senior citizen," and it was automatic. Mm-hmm. So there are certain senior benefits that are automatic here. And that kind of thing. It's Israel. Every place could do better taking care of their seniors, but Israel does okay in my eyes.
Okay. Well, I think we're probably ready to conclude. Did you have anything you wanted to sort of add in as a final note, so that people, when they tune in, they can sort of have it in their bailiwick, about what the living abroad in Israel is like?
A couple of things, I guess, to sum up. For people who are trying to figure out, is living, for those who, for the people who are Jewish and are thinking of making Aliyah, which is the move to Israel, I'll be one of those rebellions to tell you, no, it's not for everyone, even though a lot of people will tell you it is. Just like moving to Chicago is not for everyone, or moving to New York is not for everyone. But as with any move that you would make within the United States, if you decide to move to Israel and you decide, as I did, that it's going to work out, then you always find a way to have it work out. Israel is a first world country. It's a wonderful place to visit. Please come and leave your money here and then go back to the United States. Anyone wants to know more, if people do have questions, I'm sure that you and Roy have a means for people to write into you, and then Roy can forward those questions on to me, and I can respond accordingly to people who have other questions and might want to ask me something, offline. I'm happy to answer questions offline. But Israel's a wonderful place to live. It is a first world country. We have, I'll leave you with a joke. When I told my cousin who lives outside Tel Aviv I was moving to Israel, he goes, "Oh, good, I'm glad you waited. We just stopped using camels to go downtown last week." We really do have everything here. We have everything, and we've got traffic. You have it. You can have the Southeast Expressway because we've got the Ayalon, and we've got it all. We got trains that don't run. We've got highways that are full of traffic, and we have 3M must own the country because we got the corner on red tape. And with all of that, worth it? Sure, it's worth it to me.
Let me
Every
jump
time
in,
I out my
Harris and Steve. We have about 7 or 8 minutes. One thing I would like to, I'll probably put you on the spot on this. What are some of the products that originate from Israel, such as you mentioned cell phones? I understand that a lot of the cell phones have their beginnings in Israel. What are some of the other ones?
So products, interesting you should mention that because of the boycott, divest, and sanction, BDS movement that wants to do away with any products from Israel. If you own a computer, a cell phone, or anything with a chip, an Intel chip in it had some connection to Israel. If you have anything to do with Google, it's got something to do to Israel. Motorola, something to do with Israel. If you like cherry tomatoes, you can thank Israel. If you know about drip irrigation, you can thank Israel. There's just and of course Waze navigation. Thanks to Israel. A lot of high-tech stuff coming out of Israel. You may have heard of Teva Pharmaceuticals. I don't know how many of their products are in the U.S., but Teva is a national, international pharmaceutical company. There's a lot, and things that you don't even realize that Israeli technology is behind.
All right. Well, Roy, I think we can probably wrap up. I want to thank our guest, Harris Yoffa, calling in all the way from Ashkelon, right, in Israel, southern Israel. So thank you. I want to thank our audience, who is no doubt had an impressive view and a real portal right into what it's like to live in Israel. And we appreciate all of the insight that you've given us, Harris. So thank you for coming on. And this has been Community Forum with Executive Director Roy. So we're happy to have Roy here. And my name's Steve Kelley, and I've been your host today. And thanks again for watching Community Forum and Mr. Harris Yoffa, who is living in Ashkelon, Israel. Thank you, everybody.
Harris, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, and I hope you had a good Yontif and enjoy. Thank you so much. You'll let me know how I can get a link to download this.
I'll definitely take care of that information shortly.
Thank you so much. Steve, great to meet you. Dina, thank you for listening in. And to everybody else, have a great one. I appreciate it. Have a great night.